we do have to take the time out and have these discussions between ourselves, and do it in a way where we're not panicking out. I mean, I can't stress that enough. I cannot stress enough to people to do what you do because it's the right thing to do, because you, on your own personal level, and you have come to your own decisions and believe that it's the right thing to do for yourself and for your family and whatever else. Not doing things from a nature of panic, not doing things from a nature of fear. That's one of the main things that we have to understand, and as I talked about in the last segment, this idea of identifying yourself with what you're doing for, the best interest of humanity, as identifying yourself with that, instead of identifying yourself with this slave labor position that you're forced to have to be able to survive. And, if we could get people to start looking at their job function, as strictly just what they do to live and survive, and to start beginning to identify themselves and identifying themselves with being what they do for the better of humanity and for the betterment of society in general, that's to me how we begin to create a new world. How we begin to create a new world of where it's not this electromagnetically controlled matrix of control and tyranny. And how we begin, because again, we associate ourselves with what they want us to associate with, don't we? Whether it be what we're programmed to associate ourselves with through that image of who they want us to be, you see. And they start that at a very early age, don't they? They certainly do. They start that programming and that getting you to identify with an archetype, and getting you to identify with an archetype that works within the variables and the constraints that they've set up. And I've always, even instinctively, from an early age, and never even knowing why, and a lot of you I know out there have been the same way as me, because I've talked to you about it, and you've told me the same things, and we've related these things to each other in the chat room and personally, and friends here that I know that I know in in physical reality, not just in the internet. But we've talked about that, and you see a lot of us at a very early age have started to work outside of these constraints of who we are and who the archetypes that they give us to be. You see, and a lot of us started seeing those archetypes. We started seeing them in early age. We started seeing them. Most people, the most common example, where most people see this at is, of course, in the public school system. You start seeing it in cliques. You start seeing it in groups. From the preppy kids or the jocks, the athletes, to the cheerleaders or the nerds or the rockers, the people who are into, whatever, the artists, the band nerds. You have these archetypes. People inevitably fall into one of these defined cliques and archetypes that's already been set up before they got there. Mods. Oh, that's funny. I'm a mod. Are you a mod or a rocker? You're a freaking mod. That's what you are. You're a freaking mod. That's my Noel Gallagher from Oasis impersonation there. But you see, we inevitably fall into these archetypes. That are already there for us. These archetypes are already there for us. And so we fall into that clique. We fall into that group, don't we? We fall into that. instinctively almost. But see, there's, even though a lot of us end up falling into one of those just because it's really a survival mechanism. A lot of us don't. It's not that all of us have this instinct to just follow whatever archetypes we're being sold. It's almost a survival mechanism. It becomes this thing where, in order to just to survive, we fall into these archetypes. Now, the defining moment generally comes in a person's psyche when they choose to either separate from that archetype or continue on with that, on into adulthood and on throughout their, either if they go to college or they go to a job or, they get married or don't get married. But a lot of people, and there's certainly a lot of people that I've known that I went to high school with and stuff, that, I still, I see glimpses of them every now and again. I've talked to a lot of these people I went to high school with, but I'll see them on MySpace or I'll see something, But they're still in these archetypes that they fell into when they were in, middle school or high school. They've never bounded outside of, outside of that, and they've just continued in that same archetype. And see, there was never one of those strong archetypes I ever fell into when I was in school. But you know what? It's not that I'm free of that, and it's not necessarily a bad thing. Because see, my archetype was that I didn't fit into one of their archetypes. I didn't fit into one of their things. I was friends with everybody. I was probably, what you would consider a, I don't know. I was into music, so I was sort of a rocker. So I was into music. But I would hang out with artists. I would hang out with, jocks. I would hang out with everybody, And so, I would always have inevitably somebody from one of those various cliques say, "Hey, why do you hang out with that group?" And then somebody from the other group would say, "Well, why do you hang out with the jocks?" And the jock would say, "Well, why do you hang out with the art nerds and the music?" Because that was my thing. None of them defined me. None of those individual groups defined who I was. So I was sort of, bouncing between, and that's kind of become a lot of who I am and was going into adulthood. It's kind of my music taste. And people often ask me about my music. What kind of music do you play? They want a label. They used to do that to me when I played in bands and stuff. What kind of music do you play? Well, it's not really punk. It's not really pop. It's not really metal. It's not really, any of those genres. It's just music. You have to listen to it. That's always been me where, trying to put a label on me or categorize me into some corner is a dangerous thing to do and very difficult because, always seem to shadow those curtains. We're going to talk more about this and more of these ideas of really, how we allow ourselves to become who we are and how these mechanisms of control are used against us. Third hour around the corner. This is Global Reality. Stay with us.